Good morning, class. Today we're going to go over how to make the bracket. Okay, this is it right here. In the process of making this bracket, we're going to talk about auxiliary views. How do you develop an auxiliary view? We're also going to discuss how to make sure you situate this neatly on its piece of paper. Okay, because we have it on first angle projection. I'm sorry, third angle projection paper. We caught that a little earlier before I started the video. We want this in third angle projection, and this is the correct border paper that we'll be using. But before we ever start on, as I call, final copy, which is our border paper, what do? Sketch out the details, right? It's the first thing we do. So we have our equipment. For you, you have a real drafting board. For me, I'm using the my little light board that I grade with. So I've got my 30, 60, 90 triangle. I've got my 45, 45 triangle. I've got a regular ruler instead of using a scale, because scale is only for inches. We don't have a metric scale that came with your kit. You have an inch scale, architect scale to be specific. So we're going to be able to, if we had metric drawings, we could use metric. If we had inch drawings, we'd use inches. And then this is my fancy schmancy little T-square that I'll use to help lay things out. First order of business is to figure out the dimensions. We had this conversation in class before, and the outcome of that is we realized that the customer forgot to give us a dimension. Our agreement was to assume, and we know what assume stands for, so we have to get customer approval, which means we're going to give a note to the customer that they have to verify. So please remember that. Okay, so you have to have that note on your detail drawing that you provide. And we have to tag the assumed dimension. Okay? We're also going to follow all of our drafting standards for this class that we're going to be using. Our first dimension is 1/2 inch away from the part. Every other dimension after that is 3/8 of an inch. The gap from the part to the extension line is 1/8 of an inch. All the rules that you have in this handout will be followed as well. When we have to account for everything, first thing you do, since we're working on actual paper versus putting it on CAD, is to figure out the scale. We can figure out the scale by sketching out roughly what the size of this thing is. So here I have it. We agreed a 1 inch and 3/8 of an inch. We did it the old school method on how did we assume that dimension? When I say the old school approach is I took a little piece of paper, I marked off a known dimension because we know this is 0.25, right? Because that's what it tells us. And when we brought it down here, we found the 0.25 mark. And then we realized, well, it's not another 0.25 down, so we knew it wasn't 1/2 inch, so somewhere in between the halfway mark, so that's why we selected 3/8. Please remember that when you're doing your drawing. Okay? So there was a logical reason for why 3/8 of an inch was the assumed dimension. But it's assumed. Unless the customer says, yes, it's go, it's still assumed. Okay? So when I move this drawing off the board, okay, you have it in front of you. Okay, for those of you looking at this online, try to take a snapshot of that. I'll wait a moment. I'll move it up a bit so you include the note, because these are all the things you want to include in your drawing. The title of this thing, the drawing, is bracket. Remember that? So for drawing number, when you're thinking what are you going to fill in, drawn by is your first and last name, all caps, 1/8 inch tall. Drawing name is going to be bracket, all caps, 1/8 inch tall. Remember that? Centered. This is the correct paper because this will be in third angle projection, because this is an inch drawing. Scale, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to figure out what the scale is right now. No revision, because that's when you give me corrections and I redline your work. So here we go. So if I try to draw this on a blank sheet of paper at 1:1 scale, 1 3/8 is this, is going to be, if I just take my ruler, first thing you do, even if I'm sketching, I would like to tape my paper down just so it doesn't wiggle. And you would do the same on your drafting board. Yes, I'm using frog painter's tape because it's fine. You can use painter's tape instead of drafting tape. It's the same consistency for the most part. So I got my T-square, I've got this line. This, because of its shape, when we respect the cube, remember, you have to respect the cube. Okay? This is always the front, this is always the right, and this is always the top. This is a requirement in our world of engineering graphics because the entire planet operates off of this basic principle. Every software out there operates off of this basic principle. Please don't try to break the toys. The customer gave it to us this way, so this is the front of the part, whether we like it or not. We draw it based to their specifications. They show this, so this is how we draw it. Okay? So again, if that's going to be the front, we know that's going to be somewhere over here. From our last conversation on here, all I'm doing is a vertical line just to get a reference point. And then I'm going to take my ruler, and it needs to be 1.25 inches long. If I start at any dimension position, you see how I've got my T-square across, so my ruler is horizontal, sitting nicely, nothing is angled. Any dimension line, it doesn't matter, just remember that's 1 inch, that's 2 inches, so it's 1.25 inches based on the drawing. So I go 1.25. That's 1:1 scale, and we realize how small 1.25 really is. See that? So if I simply draw a line across, that's 1.25 inches. So that gives me an idea. If that's 1.25 inches, the height of this, just this piece here, is 1 3/8. This is going to be a very small part, yes? Again, doesn't matter where in the ruler you select, as long as you know where your start point is. So that's, I started at 10, but it doesn't matter, because that's 1 inch, right? Remember that. And 3/8. Now this is grade 8 a little tighter, so you just have to remember where the 8th scale is, and that's where 3/8 mark is. So the bottom of this is here. I roll my pencil when I have a thick pencil like this, so it stays sharper. You might see that in the video how I roll it. That's a way to keep a pencil sharp while you're using it. Otherwise, wherever you keep going over, like if I don't roll it, that's the part that gets flat. So if I keep rolling it, it's kind of like naturally keeping it sharp. Or, of course, use a mechanical pencil. This one came from one of our partner companies, Ace Metal Crafts. Okay? So here is just this top piece. Okay? I did not bring my colored markers, pencils today to mark this off. But I'll mark it off in a little bit. So the idea is to find, here they are, I found them. The idea is to identify, and this is what you might be doing as a beginning student. You need to identify what's what. So if this is part of the front view, right? This element right here, this piece, just this piece that I colored in orangish, is this little square right here. Granted, my lines extend past everything. How do I trim back those lines? My trusty eraser shield. If you buy nothing, buy an eraser shield and a big eraser. Because those are two staples in our world. Okay, so I can erase just the corners. If I do a really good job, I won't even chop off the corners, the actual edges. But this piece right here is just this. So I think this is going to be 1:1 scale, because when you look at it on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you certainly aren't going to go smaller. One can argue maybe I'll go bigger, but the reality is what's missing? Obviously the bottom of this, the right side view is missing. At least the right side view, possibly a top view, maybe, if we need it. We don't know yet. And of course, in the case of this drawing, since we have a part of it that's angled, that's called the auxiliary view, a view off of this oblique angle. So that's what I'm going to draw up next, so you see the whole thing, okay? I'm going to stay on this piece of paper just so you could see the entire process instead of me switching to the bordered paper. One thing I will say, when you lay this out, you see this dimension here, you see this dimension here. What do we remember about our dimensions? Your first dimension is 1/2 inch away. Your second dimension is going to be 3/8 of an inch away. So this is going to take up at least, the combined of these two dimensions, at least 1/2 plus 3/8. In round numbers, we can say 1 inch, because don't forget, you need a little bit of an extension of your extension line past the dimension, which is 1/16 of an inch. So in the end, it's like 7/8 practically, something in that range, because no, it's over 7/8, because 3/8 plus 1/2 inch is 7/8, plus 1/16, we're literally 1/16 away from an inch. So we may as well say it's two dimensions where it's going to add an inch to this view right here. It's going to take up at least an inch additional space just for the dimensions. So we should not start our part from the border. When I look at this, from this border, the border of our paper, not literally the edge of the paper, but the border. We're not going to start our part 1 inch away, because if we do, we're going to run out of room. Because if we only give ourselves an inch, and that's the inch where I need to put my dimensions, guess where your outer dimension's going to end up? Scrunched up against the border. You never want that. So we're going to start our dimensions at least an inch from the edge, which means our view will be at least 2 inches from the edge. Okay? So from a perimeter perspective, you're going to do your drawing 2 inches from the edge on this side. We haven't assessed this side yet. We just know the one side. Ironically, I think I started about 2 inches, a little more. So I started about 2.5 inches over on this blank sheet of paper. So that's not a bad spacing. Top to bottom, if you look up here, I need at least, what? Another inch, right? Because I've got my first dimension, then I've got my second dimension, and we already agree, if I stack two dimensions, I automatically need about an inch. And then I want to be an inch away from the border, so that means I'm going to be a minimum of 2 inches away from the top. These are the things you have to remember, and sometimes you got to, especially if it's going to be scaled, like our next drawing, then you actually have to sit and do some regular math, and we'll go through that for that project on video as well. But you want to start the top piece, top edge of your part. The top edge of your part should be no less than 2 inches from the top. This one I happen to make it about 2.5 as well. It's just under 2.5. So if you went in 2.5 from the edge of the paper, see that? Which means about, if I overlap these, the 2 inch mark to there. It's not bad. It's close. It's about 3 inches, 2.5 inches from the edge of the paper, about 2 to 2.5 inches from the border. Get it? So make a note of that, please. That's where you're going to start your front view. So the edge of your front view is at least 2 inches from the top, and the side edge is 2 inches from the left side. That's where the front view goes. The only problem is, can I do any more of this view? The answer is no, because I cannot draw this element down here at all, because I don't have enough information to be able to draw it. I have to first draw my right side view. My right side view is this. If I box this up, kind of looks like this. You see how I'm carrying my lines over? Remember how I talk about carrying your lines over? That's what I just did. I carried these over so I could figure out roughly where they end. Roughly. I'm just hand sketching this out. This, I carry my lines over. So that green kind of shows you what this is going to look like. It's going to look something like that. With that little mark right there. But here I'm going to draw it for real. Where do I start should be your first question. I always like to say give yourself room. Not too much room. Don't start 2 inches from the other edge. I recommend never doing that. Okay? Especially in the beginning when you're learning how to draw. You need to give yourself space from the edges because you don't know how much space you're going to end up needing. So I'd recommend that the spacing between the views, I'm actually going to use a ruler this time, be about, let's see, what's a good way to assess this? The thickness of this is 1/4 inch, so if that's a 1/4 inch, okay, we have a 135-degree angle, which means it's 45 degrees here, right? Remember that? Okay. So if we can do the math if we wanted to, because we've got the height here of 1 3/8. And this angle is 1 plus 5/8. So this angle is 1 5/8. I'm going to draw it. I can actually draw it on the side real quick. If I took the back side of this blank paper and get my mathematical answer without doing the a squared plus b squared equals c squared method. If I can find my 45 triangle, which I have. Because I'm doing it over the other piece of paper, I'm making sure it's lined up. That's a 45-degree line. I'm lining up the bottom edge. Carefully, okay? There's that. I'm going to draw 1 5/8 on my piece of paper here. That's the length of the hypotenuse. Okay? Which means it's linear width is literally, I want to try to draw this as straight as I can, so I'm going to use my triangle and my ruler together to line this up. It won't be a perfect answer, but I bet I could answer it faster than any of you have taken out your calculator, because there's my length right there. So I drew my math solution. I drew my hypotenuse because I knew my angle and I knew my length. So therefore I can just draw my answers. So I have about 1 3/8. So it's about 1 3/8 long. 1 3/8 long. Okay, guys? So if this is 1 3/8, that's what it is. I think when I look at that and I look over here, probably what? 2 inches? 2.5 inches roughly, we could say. I could even say let's make it 3 inches away. Now remember, I am lining up my ruler, not my numbers, right? Keep that in mind when you look at this video. So ignore the numbers. 1, 2, 3 is too far because it looks like I'll get too close to this edge. 1, 2, we'll go 2.5. 1, 2.5. There. That'll be our start position. It was a somewhat arbitrary, right? As you do this more and more, you will find out there's an art to what we do. That's why this is called, in many places, graphic arts. Because this is part of the graphic arts family. Some people say graphic arts, it's only the artistic side of what we do, and I tend to argue that it's everything we do. But that's me. Now notice how I'm carrying my lines across from my front view, so I don't have to rebuild. Do you see that? Do not remeasure things. As long as you did this correctly, this will come out correctly. Then all you do is use your triangle. a 45 triangle specifically. And yes, that did require you to know the math behind what's 135 degrees. Okay? 135 degrees from vertical is 90 plus 45. Okay? So you will need to remember some of that on your own. So there I've got this apex. This is where the bend is. So basically this front element here is this front edge with this edge. Now all I have to do is measure its length. The length is this plus this. Radius of 0.63 is not 0.63. Please remember what I've taught you already, which is 0.63 equals 0.625. Remember that. In CAD, when you receive a CAD drawing, it'll just be rounded. Why? Because that's what CAD does. And if they show all their dimensions to 2 decimal places, it's going to take something that is traditionally 3 decimal places and round it out. So if it's 0.625, it naturally rounds to 0.63. You will never find 0.63 on your ruler. Please do not draw it to 0.63. You have to draw it to its real dimension. Please remember that. Just like up here, there's 0.13. Remember, 0.13 is 0.125. Okay? Do not take these numbers on the sheet of paper for face value. From me or from a customer or anybody. Always question it. If you see 0.06, that means it's probably 0.0625. A 1/16 of an inch. Remember that. Those are the things you want to keep in the back of your mind. Because in industry, we try to draw perfect. 2 decimal places is far from perfect. Got it? We do not. We might build to the 2nd decimal place. That's pretty sloppy, to be honest. But we will never draw to a 2nd decimal place. So back to this, 1 5/8. We position our ruler 1 5/8 mark. I make sure it's at an angle, the right angle. That's the 1 5/8 mark. This is perpendicular. It's 90 degrees to the other. So all I had to do was draw that line at that angle. Because if this is 45 degrees, hit this way. This is 45 degrees this way. Done. That's how you get your 90 degrees in between. That's right out of geometry class. You never thought you were going to use that material ever again, right? Now you are. Geometry came from us, not the other way around. Math is a tool. It is not the reason we exist. We made it exist. Got it, guys? Remember that, please. This is a 1/4 inch. This is a 1/4 inch. Notice how I'm just drawing the little ticks to position where they belong. Then I take my ruler. First thing I do is put my pencil down. This is the best technique I can give you. Is drop your pencil where you want to draw, then bring your triangle to it. That's how you'll get better positioning. Okay? Don't try to bring the triangle to it and then bring the pencil to it because your pencil has thickness. So once you know where you're going to draw your line, just position your pencil there and then bring, see how I'm moving that over? Bring the 45 triangle to it. Okay, now you notice I didn't care where they connected in back. X marks the spot, literally, right there. Why? Did the customer tell us how long the back wall was? No. So the customer doesn't care about the back wall. The only, in this customer's case, the only thing they care about is where these holes are located because they didn't even tell us how big this front wall is. So they did not give us any information regarding that back wall, which gives us the freedom to just draw it wherever the 2 lines intersect. And then we just erase off the excess. Ditto for the little bit of excess that you see here. Now notice this is inside of the view. It's inside, so I don't want to just rub over here because I'll erase all of this too. So what's beautiful about these eraser shields, now I feel like I'm selling an eraser shield, but I'm not. You can actually take a little, like one of the holes in the eraser shield, like that, and basically just erase inside whatever's inside that hole. That saves everything else around it. Now in this case I do have a little bit of an extension line, but that's why your eraser shield has all these different shapes in it, for all these different erasing opportunities is the way I'm going to call it. So I did accidentally erase a little bit of my line. This you have to be careful with when you go back to redraw a piece of the line. I always, to be honest, I would recommend you just go back and go over the entire line, not just the piece that you're trying to fill in. Okay? But do everything lightly up front. Don't hard line anything until the end. Okay? Everything you draw lightly. Okay? Next. Okay, this bottom piece, we know that it's curved. We need to know where its center is. Well, its center is 1 inch from here. So now we're going to identify that position. 1 inch from its intersection is right about there. Take my triangle. So about there is the center. That happens to be, just carry this line across. That'll be where the center of the object is here. Notice that? I had to carry it over. I cannot get the answer of what this view will look like until I start developing this view. Notice that? I do have a little bit I got to erase here just to give myself some clarity in what my shape's going to look like. Okay, there's that. I do need to identify the diameter of the hole going through. In this case, it's a 1/2 inch diameter, 0.50. That is a clean number. I don't have to guess on that one. So I take my ruler, 1/2 inch each way. No, it's 1/2 inch total, so it's a 1/4 inch each way. So I mark it. This is why you need your 45-45 triangle. It makes life so much easier, because all you do is draw. And if you're using your T-square correctly and your paper is taped down, this is easy. That's all you do. Done. Okay, you will have to clean off those little edges. See how I keep taking out my eraser shield? It's going to become your friend. Trust me. Got it? Next, carry the lines across. What you're actually assessing, or what you're trying to assess, is where is the topmost position of my circle, which is this top edge, and where is the bottom of it, which is this bottom edge. That's the top and bottom perimeter of what the real circle looks like in this view. And this view is going to be squashed. It's going to be squashed because the face is angled. That squashed look, it's called an ellipse. Called an ellipse. Over here, this is the bottom edge of my shape. Okay? Now here I need to know the center. 1.25 inches is the length, right? So if it's a length of 1.25 inches, the center is where? If you look at it, you'll see that it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/8 inch mark right there. Never thought you were going to need to know fractions, right? No, that's all we do is live in fraction land. Okay, next. So I have my center for my little circle inside, and I also have where my arc belongs for this object. So I know where this goes, and I know where this goes. Up top and bottom, it's squashed because of this angled face. It's a true length projection. Left to right, however, it is its normal dimension. Left to right it's going to be 1/2 inch. Okay, so those are my perimeters. Here, 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 and here. Now, I can show you how to literally draw an ellipse, or which I will show you instead, is a simple method to do it by hand. You're making a smiley is the best way I'm going to phrase it. The third method is you use a template, because they do sell them at the store, and I'll see if I've got mine. I may or may not have it. It gets borrowed and never returned. And periodically I go buy another one on Amazon.com. I don't have one right now. Oh, I lied. Voila, I have it. That's the one I have right now. These come in many different angles. Okay, this is an isometric ellipse. Okay, so you could use one of these if you had one. Okay, and if it has the right dimension, it actually does. It's got a 1/2 inch one right there. And so I literally could use that. But even if I use that, notice how it's still not exactly where I made mine. See, the ticks are in different spots. So this is not necessarily set up to the angle that I'm working at. This one is an isometric ellipse, which means it's based on 30-degree angles. What angle is this face at? 45. So it's a little different. But it's only 45 in one direction, not 40, not also angled. So my ellipse template, though nice that it is not useful for this project. And that's okay, because I was going to show you the simpler method of drawing an ellipse. But just so you know, ellipses look like this. They're odd shaped. They're like eggs. Not like eggs. Eggs are technically not oval. If you notice, their bottom is a little rounder than the top, so it has a point to it on one side. An ellipse, it doesn't have a point on one side. So I like to say you're going to make smileys. That's how I'm going to phrase it. You've all drawn smileys, right, before? You know, smiley faces. So you're going to draw a happy smiley, so down here. And I'm doing it light. See that? See the smile? And then the other one, the opposite of a smile, a frown. But don't make them pointy on the ends. That's the key. Try to round them if you can. And you notice freehand, it's not going to be perfect, but that's okay for our purposes, because these are hand drawings. If I'm on CAD, I'd be using the ellipse command inside CAD, so it's a different product. But by hand, I'm making a smiley and then a frown. Make sense? Rinse and repeat down here. If I know this is the bottom piece of this smiley, and here are my edges of my smiley. So I can go halfway, half smiley. See that? Just don't make it pointy. That's the key. Do not make it pointy. Do not make it pointy. And then the other half of my smiley going this way. See how I curve it? And then I bring it down. This will take practice. I've been only at this for a few years. Got it? I'm joking. I've been at this a little longer than a few years. But the reality is, this is a skill. If any of you have an art background, you may find it a little easier to do this than others, and that's okay. But it takes practice, so just keep practicing. The key to remember is you've got limitations. You have left and right limitation and a bottom limitation. So you want your arc to fit inside that limited space. Make sense? And it's not a circle, so you can't use your circle, what do you call it, your compass, or a circle template if you have a circle template. They cannot be used for this purpose. Remember that, please. Because I know some of you, like in the last project, I think we were using like the radiuses, right, off of different objects just to draw something. Now we're not doing that. You have to draw more accurate circles. But in our case, these aren't even circles. These are ellipses. Once you have the top element, when you go down here, this is the bottom one, okay? And that has this position. Get it? Right there. And then its center is somewhere else. It's back here. Because remember, now it's the back side of the object, which is somewhere over there. Okay? So once you know where those positions are, which are over here, see I made little ticky marks, okay? And then you have the vertical references here. That's where you do not draw it from this point. You draw it here. Here. That your two smileys don't start at the same spot. Let me emphasize what I'm showing you here. Smiley one starts up here. Okay? The end of smiley one ends here. Get it? Here to here, or here to here, I don't care which. The other one, the back arc, because it's behind, it's down here. Its point of reference is elsewhere. its bottom point of reference is not the same as this one. So when you curve this bottom, right here, you curve from a different spot. You curve from a different spot. I'm trying to emphasize that curve. See that? Be very, very aware of that. You curve from a different spot. You curve from a different spot. You don't curve from the same spot. So it shouldn't be two arcs sharing the same endpoint. They are in different positions. I'm trying to emphasize that. Let me clean that one up a bit. Because this is a straight line, and then it curves down here in a different spot. Please be fully aware of that. I think I extended that line out the wrong way. Please be aware of that. Okay? And roughly you'll have something that looks like that. You can darken it up. It's okay. That's the most complicated thing you're drawing on here. That's why I wanted to show you how that gets developed. You're carrying your lines across from here to here. Okay, I'm going to use a different colored pencil. I'm going to mark this drawing up in the process of doing this. I'm going from here to here. Here to here. Okay? For my other object, see, this one is here to here. See that? Back here to back here. Different positions. And yes, if you're asking, you should be asking me the question, well, what about this point here? And you're absolutely correct. That's a different spot here. And where is its center? That's here. Okay, which means you have vertical lines going down, hidden lines. Okay. I hand drew them, which is probably not the best thing, but they're vertical hidden lines of that hole going down. I'm emphasizing that in this video. The back side, look at how far down that goes. See that? Because this is all the way down here. Its center is all the way over there. So this is a hidden line back here. And it's hidden here, the frond, until it gets into the spot where I can see it. See that? In here it looks like a half moon solid shape. Okay? Do not try to obsess over perfection. Okay? Just get practice doing it. You'll get better with time. Please do not just bury this piece right here and over and over again. Practice elsewhere and then come back and just draw it once. Okay? Because the more you mess with the spot, that's going to get messed up and you're not going to be, it's going to be a mess. And you're going to try to turn something in that's all erased like 100 times. Don't do that. Okay? Practice somewhere else a little bit. That is the most complicated piece. This is a solid line, so I'm darkening that up. See this piece here? I don't know where that is, but I don't care. But it's a hidden line here, right? Because it's the back side. Make sense? Okay?